Good morning and welcome to Japan Expert Insights on July 7th, 2021. Today we're talking about building the positive legacy of the Tokyo Olympic and Paralympic Games with Peter Gibson. Peter is Executive Advisor to the Tokyo Olympic and Paralympic Games Australian Olympic Committee. There has been a lot of concern and controversy regarding the Olympic Games this year in Tokyo. While we don't know yet how the Games will turn out, the other day Tim, Peter and I had a very good conversation about turning the Games from a one-off event into a lasting legacy for Australia and Japan. Let's see what Peter has to do with it and what he has to tell us. Peter?
Yes.
Well, could you please tell us about that project which you're working on and how it started, how you came up with the idea too?
Okay. Look, thank you, Maya, and thank you, Tim. It's my first time on Clubhouse, and I'm sitting in my vehicle at the moment in Sydney, and this sort of technology still astounds me. I wanted to give everybody just a little bit of a quick background as to why I'm with the Australian Olympic Committee and, more importantly, the Paralympics Australia as we head towards Tokyo 2020 in, I think, it's 47 days to the Paralympics and only about 16 days to the Olympics. My second home has been Japan for 36 years. I went there as the first time as a 20-year-old as a professional tennis player. Had a very short-lived career. Japan is very close to my heart. I spent 3 years working on Rugby World Cup, and we were very happy to take 3,500 Australians to Japan for Rugby World Cup. And then I rolled into Australian Olympic Committee and Paralympics Australia. My role there is a very, very varied one. Basically, it's about problem solving and taking the Australian Olympic team and Paralympic team on the journey to understand the host country that they're going to and understand how they can make their experience in Japan better for not only the host country but also their performances, creating the best environment we possibly can so they can perform at the Olympic and Paralympic Games. One of those roles was a very simple one. Was I wanted to be able to use the Rugby World Cup, the Olympics and the Paralympics to create a legacy between Australia and Japan. And I feel in my life that sport gives a wonderful opportunity to do that, bring people together. And as the ambassador for Australia to Japan said, that it's one of those great things that you don't need the language. Sport can create friendships and create bonds and bridges without the language as we share those opportunities. One thing we started was the Connect Tomodachi program. I'm sure everybody's familiar with the word Tomodachi. And we actually started that before COVID hit. But COVID really emphasized, or the coronavirus really emphasized the ability for people to work and communicate online. And Japan really hadn't had a lot of experience in that area, so it was quite a learning curve for them. We started a pilot program in 2020. Just after the Olympics and Paralympics were postponed, and we connected through the different agencies, the embassies, the different ministries of foreign affairs and the ministries of education in both countries. We connected 20 schools in Japan and 20 schools in Australia as a pilot program, and they conducted online exchanges, whether that be through email or Skype or Zoom or Google Teams or lots of different applications that teachers were coming up with. We connected the teachers. The classes were then connected through cultural and language and using the spirit of the Olympics and the Paralympics to bring the children together. The success of the pilot program astounded everybody. Didn't really surprise me because I knew that something like that would be possible between Australian and Japanese students. And I might just preface it just for a moment. I'll take one step back. Was that it was all of the students in Australia who were at schools that were teaching Japanese as part of their curriculum. That's very important. Some of you who may not know this is that the most widely taught language, foreign language in Australian primary, secondary and tertiary schools is Japanese. it's very widely taught in our schools here in Australia, and we have something along the lines of 4,000 Japanese teachers working in our private and public system. On the back of the pilot program, we decided to roll the program out in earnest, and we opened up all of the registrations across the two countries. We ended up, we had a goal of 200 schools in Australia and 200 schools in Japan. We ended up with 622 schools, being some 310 matches. And now the key to this program is it will end on July the 23rd, the opening ceremony of the Olympic Games in Tokyo. And as my role going forward, and I've already started to put the wheels in motion for this, to create a lasting legacy from the Tokyo Olympic and Paralympic Games by having these schools continue their connection online through Connect Tomodachi. Now, if we can continue that through the effects and the roll-on effects of having some 20,000 students exchanging language and culture from Australia and Japan, only is going to take 10 to 15 years to see the results of that, of young adults coming through and being able to become the leaders of industry, the leaders of government, etc., and only have positive things to think about each other's country. On July 21, we're expecting that Brisbane here in Australia is going to be named as the host city for the 2032 Olympics and Paralympics. And this program would only augur well that those children who are now 10, 11, 12s, 13s and 14s will now be at the beginnings of their career or in universities, etc. And again, and only have positive thoughts and positive experiences and memories. Everybody got that? I'm sorry, it went a little bit too long. And I'll hand you back to Maya.
Thank you, Peter. It's a tremendous project to have because of the sheer number of the number of students as well. And I wondered, because it requires a lot of organization, communication, a lot of harmonization and so on. What was the hardest part of it for you? Or maybe there have been a lot of difficult things, but what did you find the hardest? Maybe you should unmute your mic.
Sorry, I'll do that. That's a great question, Maya, and I think the easiest way for me to explain it was to take the Australian Olympic Committee on the journey of approval and decision-making in Japan as compared to Australia. In Australia, we went directly to the teachers in the schools who could make their decisions independently to join the program or not. And that was a very simple thing to do. They did not need any approval from their kocho sensei or their local governments, etc. But in Japan, we needed to go through the koen meigi, the shinsei, go through all of those particular approval processes, whether it be at the federal government, the prefectural government, the city government, and the school. And that was rather laborious, but it was certainly worthwhile to do. That was probably the most difficult thing. The second most difficult thing the challenge that we have has actually been counterintuitively from an Australian perspective, although I'm pretty sure most people here would understand, was the lack of IT facilities in some of the schools in Japan as compared to the Australian. And many Australian schools were surprised that sometimes the email or the IT and the abilities on Wi-Fi, in particular in some of the schools, really wasn't up to the ability to be able to actually conduct effective and productive online exchanges.
Thank you for that. It seems to have changed during the pandemic, right?
Very much so. It's been something which has been, I've seen, one of the great things that I love about Japan is that once there is a consensus to move forward on something, it happens extremely quickly. Getting to that point can sometimes be a slow process, and you need to have that patience and persistence. But once we get to that point, it goes quite rapidly. And now we're seeing schools, some of the heartwarming relationships I've seen happen. And if anybody wants to have a look at our Facebook page, you'll see what I'm talking about. It's just on the Australian Olympic Connect Tomodachi Facebook page. It's a closed page for all of our teachers to share experiences. And we've got a small school in northern Hokkaido that has one child in year 5 and 2 children in year 6. There's only 3 people in the school, but we've connected them with a school in outback desert Queensland. So you could not get more opposite schools, and their exchanges have been just heartwarming.
Yes, that's fascinating indeed. And the other day we talked about the cultural differences as well, but they come in different shapes and forms at different levels in the two society, the Australian and the Japanese. So I remember that we were talking about, as you said, persistence and also the let's say high administrative barriers. You mentioned them just now. But how do you see, in purely cultural, from a purely cultural point of view, how is this program going to benefit both sides, the Australian and the Japanese? Because we can see, Tim has been also working in the field of cross-cultural consulting, and from our experience, it seems that most of the time, understanding each other's culture is the first barrier and the first step forward into moving together and doing things together.
I think it's first, second, and third step in my opinion, and watching the Australian children standing in front of a camera and doing jiko shokai, their self-introductions in Japanese, and starting to talk a little bit about the culture of our country, and then having the opposite side with the Japanese children introducing themselves in English. This is doing things which is in a completely foreign language to them, and understanding that there are differences, and breaking down those unknown barriers, those mysteries of each other's cultures as to what and at the end of the day, finding out that there's so much more similarities than there is differences. And that's been one of the overwhelming feedback from the teachers, as we're seeing the kids, the Australian kids are sort of, oh yeah, they've just got a playground or a schoolyard or a classroom just like ours, and one of our schools has done an entire documentary to introduce their school from top to bottom, and the Japanese have done it on the same side. So it's just been watching the mystery, I suppose, unravel for these children, where, as I said, the similarities between them are far greater than any of the differences that they have. And I think, isn't that what we're trying to do, pretty much across the world? I can only talk from an Australian-Japan's perspective, because that's the only area that I'm really experienced in. But I would imagine that, and this program, it won't have me involved. The Japanese side will, ongoing, but we have the Beijing Winter Olympics coming up, and the Australian Olympic Committee is looking to roll out a similar program in Beijing, and therefore Paris in 2024 and Los Angeles in 28. So from my perspective, I'm very proud of the legacy of this program going on to other countries and other Olympic and Paralympic games. But I'm more importantly proud of the legacy we can have from this program in the Australia-Japan relationship, because that's what's closest to my heart.
Well, you should be proud, Peter. I just can't say how much I love what you're doing, and we'll get to Ren, and he's told me in a second. Just a couple comments. I rewatched your Vimeo video, and Maya, maybe we could put a link to that up for folks who want to really get more details on what the Tomodachi program is all about. But I had to do a double take and go back and re-listen when I think it was the ambassador. I can't remember who it was, but it was a lady, and she said that 400,000 Australian children are studying Japanese, and that is
correct.
Just that is incredible. And the kind of parallel I look at is I did a lot of exchange between Hawaii and Japan, and there are over 500,000 Japanese studying hula, which is more than all of Hawaii. And I always thought about how there were very deep connecting points between Hawaiian and Japanese culture. And what you're doing, you're creating these connecting points. And I truly believe, this is my philosophy about learning a language. The first thing, without motivation, it's not going to happen. So you need to create the motivation. And there's nothing greater in motivating children, especially, to learn a language than making friends. And, without that, and that's exactly what you're doing, you're creating these relationships. So I absolutely love your approach, and I really, I applaud what you're doing. And again, I urge everybody to go watch that Vimeo, that little thing you put together. It's about 30 minutes, mostly in Japanese, but
it's a great Vimeo, and I'm very proud of that one. And to have the ambassadors of both countries so warmly, and we've got Olympic athletes on that Vimeo. We've got teachers from both sides on that Vimeo giving everybody a real rundown of it. Tim, you know me, I'm pretty black and white, and I'm very much results based. My ultimate goal with this is to create, of those 600 schools that are involved, we won't be successful with this, Tim, until when it is safe to do so, and those schools can actually go and visit each other. That will be the time when I feel that we've really had success with this program. And to be honest with you, as far as my work that I do with the Australian Olympic and Paralympic team, this is still only taking up probably about 20 to 25% of my time. The majority of it at the moment now is preparing the teams for their charter flight departures or their commercial departures and their returns, their COVID countermeasures, their ability to be able to actually, I don't know if anybody saw that, but our softball team was the very first foreign team to arrive in Ota City in Gunma Prefecture. And I took them through a cultural experience of how to actually go to Japan, because there was such a negative atmosphere that perhaps they were going into. And we had one of our kanji masters here in Australia actually write some welcoming kanji on these very large signs that the teams could take around and put in their hotel windows and their bus windows, just thanking the Otoshimin in Gunma Prefecture for welcoming them and keeping them safe, and we will be keeping each other safe for the Olympic Games and beyond. And those simple things have been such an important part of breaking down those barriers, cultural barriers between the two countries. And it was just a simple thing of doing it in beautiful, actually it's not, well, obviously not kanji, it's shodo. So it's actually the calligraphy. One of our calligraphy masters here in Australia was able to write those ones. And you'll see, if you go to the Facebook page, you'll see them actually in the windows of the Ota prefectural city government. And it made such a difference. It actually got on the news.
Well, I'll repeat myself. It's fascinating. And as Tim said, that's the best way to go for the future. Well, Ren, Hitomi, good morning. Oh, it's good evening for you both. Yes.
Good afternoon.
Or good afternoon, yes. Thank you very much for coming up, yes, on stage.
Thank you. Hitomi-san, would you like to go first? Ladies first, I guess.
Oh, thank you. I was trying to come up with something to say, because this title, I look at the, building the legacy of the Olympic and Paralympics this year. It is so challenging. And then, as Peter said, it is such a challenging time. How do we create positive, even atmosphere and welcoming atmosphere in Japan, while a lot of Japanese people are petitioning not to have Olympics? But at the same time, like you said, Olympic is an event to connect people around the world, and then break down somewhat, understand the culture, not breaking down, but to connect different cultures. So I'm also thinking, okay, how do we leverage this event, even though this challenging time? And I just don't have my, ideas. I'm still thinking, how do we do that? And I'm listening to you. I think it's great to have these programs and having people in Japan. I am hoping that somehow, even though this challenging, pandemic COVID time, and I'm really frustrated about how Japanese government is responding to this situation, like anybody else here. But anyway, how do we make a positive spin to this event? I just don't have the answer yet.
And Hitomi, I don't have the answers. I don't have all the answers. I think there's two, and I can only talk from the Australian perspective. We're sending the Australian Olympic team is approximately 1,000. So we're actually the third largest team visiting after Japan and the USA. So we have 486 athletes. I'm very proud to say that we've actually got 54% of our team are female, which is the first time.
That's wonderful. Yes, that is wonderful.
And it's the largest Australian team to go overseas since Athens 2004. Our Paralympic team is also huge. With nearly officials included is 500, and I can't wait to get back to Japan shortly. And I'll be there. I don't care if I have to quarantine on the way back. But I haven't been to Japan since Rugby World Cup, and I'm going crazy. Hitomi, in answer to your question, I think there's two things that I've been working hard. I've been working hard with the Australian Olympic team and the Paralympic team for about 3 years now, and we conduct weekly online Japanese lessons. We conduct weekly online cultural lessons, and I don't think there's too many national Olympic committees that do that. And one of the things that I've been very big on is the humility of the Australian team, both Paralympics and Olympics, as we come into Japan. So to be humble, to be respectful, and to be understand and be empathetic that this is a very difficult time for Japan, a hugely difficult time, and a lot of the stuff that is happening below the surface and bubbling below the surface. What we have encountered, as I said, our softball team going into Gunma Prefecture, is that and it won't surprise anybody, is that the welcome that they received from the Ota City and from Gunma Prefecture has been nothing short of spectacular. We've got our boxers who've been down in Miyazaki. Now Miyazaki has actually been putting out the welcome mat for those ones. So although these problems have simmered quite hard, I'm confident, Hitomi, I'm quietly confident that the true Japanese spirit will come out as people start to see. And I will preface this by saying that our COVID countermeasures that we're sharing with TOCOG, the organising committee, go far beyond what is necessary in the Tokyo playbooks. Meaning that, for example, in our Paralympic team, one of the biggest problems that we have is the ability of the teams to then actually interact with the local population, because we just can't do that. And that's going to be a very, very difficult thing. We had before COVID, we had many of our athletes would have been visiting schools, because our Paralympic headquarters is in Chuoku, in a primary school in Harumi. And we were going to be working with that school, with our athletes, and doing all of the things that you would expect in a normal situation. We can't do that, so it's very, very difficult. Having said that, I think that, as I said, with the softball team, I think it's been really heartwarming. They were very nervous. They were the first team into Japan. They were expecting, they had no experience of Japan apart from those players who had played there before, and they were almost thinking that they were going to get protested against. So they've been very pleasantly surprised about the welcome in Ota in Gunma Prefecture.
I'm glad to hear that, and I hope they have a good time in Japan, even though this is a difficult situation. And then I applaud your effort, Peter. That's great.
Thank you, Hitomi. Thank you.
Thank you, Hitomi. Brian.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for offering the space. Hello, Peter.
Hey, Ren.
Thank you very much for your 2019 Rugby World Cup Japan, the Australian team. I understood that you were starting.
I might have lost you there.
Oh, hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I've got you. You might have to repeat that last bit.
Yeah, this is about your Australian 2019 effort.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, because I was in Japan at that time, and that Rugby World Cup was the best I have ever experienced. And so I feel I have to ask you this, if I may. I understand when you were leading the Australian team in Japan, you visited Sapporo, Tokyo, Oita, and Shizuoka. And would you care to share a little bit of the memories that you had in 2019 in the World Cup Rugby, and what would you like to repeat, if you could, for this upcoming Olympic?
Oh, Ren, you've touched on my real sweet spot, because rugby is my real passion. I was very lucky. I was very lucky, Ren, that I was actually working for one of the official travel agents at that time, and we achieved #1 sales in the world, not just Australia, but #1 sales in the world for Rugby World Cup guests to Japan in 2019. Over the 8 weeks of the tournament, the company I was working with was responsible for taking 3,500 Australians to Japan. We had 81 tours, and I'm very proud that of those 81 tours that we took, there was 21 of those were from Australian schools into Japan. We followed the Australian team from Sapporo, as you said, down to Tokyo. Now, it's very important to understand here that, I think there's a lot of people who understand that obviously before COVID hit, when Japan going through a tourist boom, there was 30 million people visiting Japan. Only 2% of that 30 million people ever visited the area of Tohoku, and in particular, none of them visited really the area which was devastated by the tsunami and the earthquake of 2011. When I built these tours, these 81 tours to Japan for the Rugby World Cup, and the company's name is Gulliver's, if anybody wants to have a look at that history, I was the only one from all around the world that actually decided to put visits in our tours, visits to Iwate Prefecture, Miyagi Prefecture, and Fukushima. So we had schools from Australia visiting Fukushima Prefecture during their time in Japan. To actually get the school to agree to go to Fukushima Prefecture was a very, very big problem. But I felt strongly about it, that when we were there to see the Australian team in Sapporo, we had basically about a week that we could take all of these tours. So rather than actually just going Sapporo straight down to Tokyo, it was the opportunity to actually visit, and we visited Kamaishi, we visited Otsuchi, and we took these children, or these Australians, to these areas that they would never have gone to. And we played teams in Kamaishi, we played teams in Fukushima. And we played, so they built these relationships with the schools there through rugby in areas that they would never do. We did the same thing in Oita Prefecture. We did the same thing in Shizuoka Prefecture. That took a long time, Ren, to be able to do that, because you've got it. I was there 3 years before we visited, creating relationships with these prefectural governments so that we could take these groups into there, so that they would have, rather than a just go and visit and look, they actually had a deep dive into those. And Kamaishi was, you could see high school students that we were taking there. We actually had approximately we had 1,200 people that we took into Oita, and approximately 800 people that we took into Iwate and Miyagi prefectures, and 300 into Fukushima. And you could see the profound effect that it had on people, that they really wanted to, if anybody does understand what Australians are a little bit like, we're very experiential when we wanted to actually travel. And that was one of the things that we wanted to do. We just didn't want to actually go to Japan and visit during the Rugby World Cup. We wanted to dive in. And that was very, very pleasing. And the results were amazing. We had 3,500 people from the Anketo, the questionnaires afterwards, etc., we had 83% of those people had never visited Japan before, and 82% of them said that they wanted to get back to Japan as soon as they possibly could. I hope that helps, Ren.
Well, that's a beautiful story. I play rugby myself, so your story really touched my nerve in a good way, in a very expressive way. I thank you very much. I didn't know that you actually stopped over Miyagi and Fukushima on the way to Tokyo. Did any Japanese news media cover that? I didn't know that.
Yeah, I believe they did.
They did. Okay, good.
Yeah, I know that Fukushima. I think I can't remember. It's called Shippo. I think it's a mixture between the kanji for the shimin, or maybe it's minpo. I can't remember, but I'm sure that they did. We had some amazing experiences of being welcomed by the governor of Oita for some of the private school rugby teams and public school rugby teams that visited. So that was and that unfortunately with the coronavirus, the ability to carry on that legacy from Rugby World Cup, Ren, was stopped in its tracks. So as soon as we have 21 schools who visited during that Rugby World Cup, I know that as soon as we're able to travel again, that they will be wanting to go back, because Australian schools tended to have a feeling of they would go to Europe, or maybe they would go to England for their rugby, etc. I think I've opened their eyes that as you know, Ren, the rugby fraternity and the rugby society in Japan is a very healthy one. What club do you follow, Ren?
Well, I am in the U.S. right now. I live in Philadelphia right now, but I find it even the Americans who love American football, when they play rugby, they look like rugby players. So, I stay in Japan until high school when I play rugby. But my friends in Japan, my high school friends in Japan, continue to play rugby. But what you told me really is uplifting, because there are so many people in Japan who are not so sure this Olympic is going to be successful. And like you told me, someone was talking about some kind of nervousness. But the kind of things that your team did in 2019 is a perfect example to show what sports or international sportsmanship or sportswomanship can really change the mentality of the people, including people in Fukushima that you went to encourage. The power of this is kind of difficult to describe. So I hope, and I'm sure you will, the Australian team will be able to uplift the spirits of people in Japan, and really looking forward to that. And thank you for taking your team to Japan this summer.
Thank you, Ren. I'll do the best I can.
Thank you, Maya-san.
Thank you, Ren. Yes, as you said, Ren, it's uplifting, and I truly wish that there were more countries and more Olympic committees doing the same thing as Peter does. Well, Peter, I would like to just go back to one thing which you mentioned, and which is very important when you actually work with Japan and the Japanese public authorities. It is patience, and actually you always have to work ahead of time and think ahead of time, so you start early in order to get the results you want. So thank you very much for mentioning that. And Tim, do you have any comments at the moment? Before that though, for everybody who is listening at the moment, let us know when you want to join the discussion, talk with Peter, Tim, Ren, or Hitomi, and then we will let you up on stage so that we can continue this discussion about building a legacy, a positive legacy and a lasting legacy from an event which has garnered a lot of controversy, a lot of negativism as well.
Sorry, Tim, if I can make one very quick point. I also think that it's going to be, and let's be really really honest about this. This is going to be Japan's games, whether it's the Olympics or the Paralympics, and the performance of, I'm expecting arguably the best performance from the Japanese Olympic team and Paralympic team in history. I think that will be one of the major things. We as the Australian team can only do as much as the COVID measures will allow us to do. And as I said, that's a real challenge for us, because I know that we had a lot of community activities planned before the pandemic hit. But the performance of I expect, and I've been doing a bit of research on this, I expect the performance of the Japanese Olympic and Paralympic team to exceed everybody's expectations. I certainly hope that is the case, and I think that will be one of the great moments in history to take that negative, I suppose, public atmosphere at the moment and maybe turn that on its head.
Yeah, that's, I did want to, first of all, thank you, Ren and Hitomi, for giving us Japanese points of view on this and coming up on stage. I'm gonna confess here that I am one of those people, I don't know if negative is the word, but I had a lot of trepidation about the Olympics and whether it was a good idea. And I want, Peter, just listening to you, you've won me over. In other words, I think what you're doing makes up for all the potential negatives that my imagination has been able to conjure up. It's like it's made it all worth it just when I hear what you're doing. And it also makes me want to root for Australia, even though I'm an American now. I think I'll be rooting for your country. So those are just my comments. And I can't. No.
Can I make one point, Maya, on this one?
Yes, sure.
This is my experience from going into most situations where when we look at arguably the 2000 Olympic Games was marked down as the greatest in history. In the 6 months leading up to the Olympic and Paralympic Games in Sydney in 2000, the negativity in this country was incredibly high. It was the whole thing was get out of Sydney. It's going to be a waste of time. We had a lot of people who just left Sydney to go somewhere else because they thought that it was going to be so bad, the traffic was going to be bad, the things like that. One of the endearing parts, I live in Sydney, and one of the things you ask any person in Sydney who was there during the Sydney Olympic Games, and they will tell you it was like nirvana. It was like an incredible, so there was negative run up to it. Athens was the same thing. The games ended up doing 2012. London, the negativity in the lead up to it ended up being misled and misplaced. And classically, Rio, we had the Zika virus, we had all the things that and it ended up being a great games. And the legacy there. Now, the legacy from the Athens Games, I do agree, and also the Rio Games could be better. This is what I worry about with Japan. And one of my goals of doing what I'm doing is to make sure that the legacy is there, because I'll be honest with you, the National Olympic Committees around the world, as soon as the flame goes out in Tokyo, the National Olympic Committees and Australian Olympic Committee and Paralympic Committee is the same. They're now turning their eyes to Beijing and Paris, and more importantly, Brisbane 2032. So the legacy for them is not high on their priority list. It is certainly high on my priority list.
Thank you for that. It's so important, because I think it's not only the Olympic committees, we as a societies actually tend to forget about the games quite soon after they're over.
Sorry, Maya, mic's off.
Sorry, right. Well, I think that it's, of course, the Olympic committees, because they always concentrate on the event which is coming up. But at the same time, as societies, we also tend to forget, the events which have finished. And it's important to keep them, and to keep them in our mind. And I mean, the medalists and the athletes who participated, remembering them is great, but also remembering the games as part of the history of that society. And well, it's so much more important than just having the games and forgetting about that. But you are right, yes. Administrations, they're busy, and the Olympic committees, they also concentrate on everything which comes next, and that's it. So we've got Kiyoshi. Good morning.
Good morning, good evening.
Oh, good evening.
Yes. Yes, I'm from New York City, and thank you for hosting this room about Olympics legacy. It was great to hear the story Peter shared with us this morning in Japan. It's great to hear that athletes already arriving to Japan and having like some sort of like a warm welcoming, etc. That's kind of the stories I have never heard on like a news headlines. It's maybe different in news media in Japan. Like they may be like highlighting all kinds of like good moments. As I was listening to your stories, I was just checking like New York Times headlines, and I was just like like a kind of like a depressed again. Like it's kind of all negative. Like there are several stories, and more than half of them are like why Olympics still happening, and it's all about cost. Like $15 billion for the stadium, etc. And that kind of like stories. And also the point Peter made about Japanese Olympics team will perform really well in this game. It's kind of like makes me sad again, because it's always like going forward all the like a medal rush comes with Japan did well because of COVID or something along the line, and but I just don't want to fill the room with all the negativities, and I really do want to find positives, and I think it's like we're like only like 2 or 3 weeks away from like the games actually starting, right? And I think we just have to switch gear. Like I think we're past the point of like whether if the game should be happening or not happening, and and I think Japanese government really have to stop delaying all the decisions or making announcements.
That's right.
Yeah, they should just like lay out like at least like a few scenarios rather than delaying all the decisions. But like they should say like if COVID condition goes like this, then we will do this. And another scenario, if COVID scenario, the COVID situation goes bad, we will do this. If situation goes better, we will do that. They just need to like have some sort of like a clarification, like clarities, and just to stick with the plan rather than delaying all the decisions up until the very end of the very beginning of the game itself. And
yes.
Yeah, that's like the worst part of this situation, like this case. And I think this Tokyo Olympics could have been the best. Like I several of my colleagues has been really planning to fly to Japan just to watch the game, and they actually had the ticket, and they were ready to bring the entire family to there to enjoy the game. And because the government already canceled the dismissed the possibility of having a foreign entertainer, not entertainers, but visitors. So that option is gone, and at that point, there's like a zero interest among my American friends who want to visit Japan to enjoy the Olympics. So and so it, as Hitomi has been saying, like it's just so hard to find fun out of this like a super difficult situation. And but I think we are past the point of arguing whether if we should be hosting or how we should be hosting. And I think we just need to focus on on the games itself. Like one thing I'm kind of like not very sure or like a surprise about what's happening in Japan today is that some of my friends went to Japan. Like a Japanese friend visited Japan like very recently, and all of them just says, people are just having like a normal life, even under like emergency orders. And I'm kind of I was very surprised, and all of my friends were surprised. And the numbers doesn't seems to be like getting too good. And I hear all the mixed news about like a COVID vaccination, and the Japanese government delaying the vaccination starting a point about like nearly like a half year. After a lot of Western countries started vaccinating, and we are kind of getting there, but the situation could have been very different if the Japanese people being vaccinated, the number of Japanese people vaccinated passed like a 30% or so. Like that 30% seems to be the number I feel very I saw some like a visible difference in the US. Like the moment we passed around 30%, we started to see very different world. So I think I've been jumping around the topics and spitting out a lot of opinions and facts and stuff like that. But I think we just have to switch the gear and focus on how to enjoy the game without spreading the virus.
Kiyoshi, I think you're right. The games are going to happen no matter what we do. I would love, Maya, to actually have. I'll be in quarantine for 2 weeks after coming back from Japan, and got plenty of time. I would love to have this clubhouse again after the Paralympic Games, and we could have a look at what happened. I think that would be an important point.
Yes.
To go and then to sort of say, okay, what are the things? What are the takeaways that we can do this? It's going to happen. Kiyoshi, I think you'll be very interested when we see a few American athletes, Australian athletes, or athletes from anywhere in the world when they start to win a couple of gold medals, or Japanese athletes win a couple of gold medals, and we see what sort of a media reaction. The media will always put out something negative. There's no doubt in my mind. The positive stories probably don't sell newspapers. But once we actually get things going, I'll be very interested. I hope I'm right. I really do. I hope I'm right. Otherwise, I'm probably just a misguided optimist.
I
Yes.
totally agree with you. Yes.
Yes,
I think you're right here.
I agree.
And to echo what Kiyoshi said, we're beyond the point of no return, right? And so we have to, this is the hand we've been dealt. And I agree with Peter. I think once Japanese people realize, okay, they're here, I believe in the Japanese people. I think they're going to rise to the occasion. And I think it's yeah.
Well, from what I have seen so far, and I have been here in Japan for 20 years, even when there is a lot of negativity to an event and accompanying, let's say negative media reports and so on, once the event begins, really everybody switches gear, as Kiyoshi said. And then there is that collective push for success. And I think that this time the same thing will happen. Well, despite the negative reports, because as Peter said, well, the media, they always look for the negative because that's what sells. But at the same time, the sheer energy coming from the athletes, even if you have to watch them on TV only and not in person, so that sheer energy and joy of winning, competing, and meeting their fellow athletes, I think it's really um, oh, what's that? The word doesn't come, but well, it transpires, and it is well, something which people feel, and well, sooner or later, you know, they just tune in to that mood.
I actually love that, and I'm fascinated by this observation that rather than Japanese people, non-Japanese people have faith in Japanese.
Yes.
Thank you very much for it. I see that in every room. Japanese are talking about so negative about all this and that about Japan, but you guys are so positive, and I love it. And I agree with you.
He told me I've been doing a lot of work with Japan over many years of introducing people who don't know about Japan, and businesses and corporations and government. Yeah. And I have this strange little Australian saying, I hope you don't mind, but it's a bit weird. Doing business with Japan is like pulling teeth, but you end up with really great teeth.
I love it. That's a great one. Love it. And like you guys say, you know, it's happening no matter what. You know what? It's gonna be legacy anyhow, right?
Yeah.
This is unforgettable.
And he told me the Olympics, and more so, and I've got to be honest with you in the sense that I have a 24-year-old son with a disability, and Paralympics is very close to my heart. Olympics and Paralympics throughout history is a storyboard of human endeavour. It's about overcoming adversity, and more so in Paralympics than anywhere else. You have the #1 wheelchair tennis player in the world by the name of Shingo Kunieda. His story is he's arguably the greatest wheelchair tennis player that's ever played the game. His story at the Paralympics is just phenomenal, and these are the stories we're talking about. If I can just do a little bit of a shout out to the Paralympic and the Paralympic family around the world. If anybody gets a chance to get onto Netflix and watch a documentary by the name of Rising Phoenix. It's a story about a number of different Paralympic athletes and focuses on the 2016 Rio Paralympic Games. One of the greatest stories of human endeavour, of people overcoming adversity. And I think that's one of the things that we've been from an outsider's perspective here, Tommy, and yes, I have 100% faith in the Japanese population and Japanese society. And an interesting little by story on that was how much the relationship between Australia and China has changed. But the relationship between Australia and Japan has only got stronger, and people are starting to realise those ones that actually started to concentrate in Australia on the Chinese market have now been disappointed by their relationship, but they know that they're friends over 50 years, remembering that Australia was the first country in the world post-World War II in 1957 to establish normal trade relationships. Now that's how deep the relationship between Australia and Japan runs. So I think if you want to do yourself a little favour, the Rising Phoenix is an incredible documentary on the Paralympic movement and the Paralympic family around. And I'm so proud of our friends at Dentsu and also the Japanese, I suppose, what am I looking for, media, that the Paralympic movement has almost been given parity as far as the commercialism and promotions and communications in Japan. Whenever I've been there, and I was there 2019 looking at Paralympics, is given almost parity as far as the media coverage is concerned, and it's been so pleasing to see.
Good to hear, and I sure would check that out. Thank you for letting us know.
And Peter, to your point of overcoming adversity, and that the Paralympic athletes are the heroes, the actual heroes of the Olympic Games, I have always wondered why the Paralympics do not precede, the Olympics, because that's what we need to see, to be inspired I mean, people without disabilities, we very seldom appreciate how blessed we are and how lucky we are and how much we have and how well, let's say that everybody's path and everybody's journey is difficult, but when compared, to the journeys of the Paralympic athletes, well, we really have it the easy way. So I don't know how it is possible and whether it is possible to actually change the order so that we have the Paralympic Games first, so that people get inspired, and after that having the Olympics. So it has always been on my mind, and I wonder whether other people would actually agree and whether it would be ever possible.
Beautiful. I agree.
And a great segue, Maya, and I'll say this because I actually get quite emotional about this part of the thing, is because Japan has such a wonderful history with the Paralympic Games. The very first Paralympic Games was in Rome in 1960. And in 1962, a professor who came out of actually Beppu by Professor Nakamura was actually the driving force behind the Paralympic Games actually being the Paralympic Games in Tokyo in 1964. There was never going to be a Paralympic Games in 1964 until Professor Nakamura. If anybody wants to have a quick history lesson, Isaac Meyer is a podcaster who runs the history of Japan, and he has a fantastic episode on the 1964 Olympic Games, which basically became reality in a period of 2 years because the Heisei Emperor of the time, the Crown Prince Akihito, became the patron of those games in 1964, which became a lasting legacy. And I look at the Paralympic movement in Japan at the moment. You've got a sensational, in Ariake there, you've got a sensational centre of excellence, which only 2 national Paralympic committees in the world have. It is such an incredible facility there that allows all of the Paralympic sports, which generally are not as well funded as the Olympic sports are, and they really are just so much more effective in the way. So I'm looking forward to a fantastic performance by the Japanese Paralympic team too. But Japan should be very proud of their Paralympic history, and 1964 is testimony to that.
Yes, definitely. Thank you, Peter. We also have Yuka. Yuka, hello. So I think it's good afternoon or good evening for you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Maya and Tim, for hosting another great club. And Peter, it's very hard for me to ask you this question after your story on Rising Phoenix. I don't want to be a party pooper. I'm having a second thought about asking this, but I think it's that Hitomi-san was right. Japanese tend to be more negative or harder critic on Japan than foreigners, and I think it's probably we have high expectation. So I may be wrong, but and then I am a very positive person, but I am misguided pessimist when it comes to Japan. So let me ask you this. And I'm so grateful that Australia is sending 1,000 people. And then you said around 500 are athletes. And I think it's great. I mean, like a US, like a US is like, it's just a supposed superstar. And, and then in terms of population, per capita athlete, US probably leads so many countries. But so I have I'm sorry, I'm just nagging this question. Then again, I'm sorry, people, if I, sort of raining on your party. But
don't worry, you could go for it.
So when those athletes and those 1,000 people, do they require a lot of convincing from the committee, or they're willing to come and then show their sportsmanship? Or maybe this is actually, I thought about this because my Japanese friends, they only get COVID vaccination because I think a city or governments are offering. some sort of assurance. If they get some side effect, they get some sort of money. Anyway, it's kind of, I don't like this idea. But anyway, are those athletes, are they really willing participants to the game?
The 100% yes. I do not know personally of any. So there's nearly 400, so 186 athletes in the Australian Paralympic team, and some 497. I've still got a few who are actually still qualifying in the Australian Olympic team. So let's say the 700. I do not know of any athlete that has pulled out because they do not want to go to Japan because of the COVID situation or any negative atmosphere.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, and our population, just to give you a little bit of an understanding about how sport is part of our culture here, we're 26 million people, and that's the size of our Olympic team. So our Olympic heritage and our Olympic history is part and parcel of the Australian fibre. And we consider this as actually, because of the time zone and the same region, we've always considered this as sort of almost a home games for us. And I get back to Kiyoshi's point, and it does fill me a little bit with regret because, as I said, I've now been involved with Japan for more than half of my life, and it is my second home and very close to my heart. And I know that this particular games, had it been without COVID, etc., would, in no doubt in my mind, be the greatest games in history.
Yeah, when you said that, maybe I'm really, hoping Japan will do good. And then I was recalling, this the soccer World Cup after the tsunami in 2011. I think Japanese female team won the gold. Do you call it gold medal? But yeah,
Nadeshko. That was the Women's World Cup.
That's right. Yeah. No, I think so everybody got together. So that was a great story. And again, thank you.
And Yuka, if you actually go back to the history, in 1964, which was Japan, as I said, rising phoenix. It's actually quite appropriate, is it not? Japan rising from the ashes of World War II. If you look at the Japan volleyball team in 1964, which came out of one of the company leagues and won the gold medal there. Well, that's gone down in folklore. They make movies.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. That's why I love to come to this club. I always feel better after, asking questions and listening to everybody talk. So, kudos to Clubhouse.
Thank you, Yuka. I think this is good therapy for all of us. It's a shot of
me. Yeah, especially me.
A shot of inspiration. But I just want to all the Japanese on stage and in the audience, it's amazing because I think the Japanese don't realize, especially, I don't know, in the last 30 years, maybe how beloved Japan has become. A lot of it has to do with their pop culture, anime, and, the culture in general. And I've even seen that generational change in my own country. When I was young, there wasn't positive images about Japan. I'm an old guy. I'm 60. But now, in high school, my wife was a Japanese teacher at a Japanese an American high school, and she had more students than any other language teacher. She had 22, and it was a really small school. So, I want Japanese people to be more confident, and I understand how Japanese tend to be harder on themselves, but you're a minority. The rest of the world really has a lot of positive feelings toward Japan, and I want all Japanese people to.
And can I make one point, Tim? We have no family and friends that are travelling with our Olympic and Paralympic teams. And if it's just one very, very quick point. So the normal support networks, you've got to understand, we've got Paralympic and Olympic athletes, average age 23, 24, 25, etc. They don't have their support networks around them. Some of them don't even have their coaches travelling with them. They don't have their family and friends to support them in a foreign environment, which is they've now got 5 days to acclimatise to a Japanese summer. Which is, as everybody here knows, is not an easy thing to do. So we're sort of reaching out to the Japanese people to adopt us in a certain way, and we've tried to make that clear through all the different sports that we're dealing with, because we deal with, there's 43 sports, Olympic sports, I think 32, 14 Paralympic sports, etc. So going to the home nation and reaching out to them, because there's going to be a lot of very nervous young athletes there coming into Japan.
Thank you for that, Peter. And I'm sure that, well, they will be, yes, nervous, but at the same time, they'll get support here in Japan, and I have no doubt about that. And then, Peter, thank you very much for suggesting having, the sequel of this room after the Paralympics are over and you're back in Sydney. I think that it will be a great way to look back and actually talk about the takeaways and how we can go forward from there too.
Yeah.
Yes. So let's do it. And well,
Peter, you're welcome here anytime.
Anytime, yes. Absolutely.
No, thank you very much, guys. I can't wait to get to Japan. I'll be there for the four weeks, and my saddest moment is actually getting on the plane to come back home. But anyway.
Yes, but this pandemic will be over at some point, sooner than later, I hope. So at that time, we hope that you'll get back to Japan, and so we can, freely go out and just chill out.
And I'm still looking at buying a place in Atami, Tim.
I can't wait till we're neighbors and we can raise a glass of wine.
Well, I'll have to visit Atami more often then. Right. Yes, sure. Well, with this, it looks like the people in the audience are getting ready to go about their daily routines and probably going to work as well. I'm going to wrap up the room by saying once again, thank you to everybody. Thank you, Peter, for this wonderful conversation again. I'm looking forward to continuing it. Tim, thank you very much for being here as always.